Yes, I do.
Thank you. Okay, we'll get right to it. Dr. Pino, pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Joe.
Yep. Okay, for communications. Anybody have anything from DEEP in the last month? Nothing. Good. Department of Agriculture, Aquaculture, Steve or Jeff? Okay, Jeff?
The only thing I might say is we're still trying to develop the scope of work for the shellfish enhancement project in the area south of Veterans Park. And we're working on that with Mr. Carey at the Bureau of Aquaculture.
Okay. I did get a notice from Dr. Crosby, and they have a meeting scheduled. I think it's coming up on the 26th, but I may have my date screwed up because I got several appointments today. But they are going to get together on that and put all the heads of state together to come up with a plan. Bill, anything from the Department of Health?
No, not really. I guess minor thing is we've been, doing our beach sample since Memorial Day rather, and samples have all been coming up pretty good. We haven't had to close any beaches. So other than that, I have nothing.
Okay, I did, in your absence, I did send a note to Deanna. They, Dick did a water sample a few weeks ago because we had red water. And what he did get back from Milford was prorostomium minimum. And I sent a note to Diane because when I was walking my dog at Taylor Farm, I ran into two other dog walkers who complained to me that their dogs had gotten sick, vomiting, diarrhea. And I said to them that it could be the dinoflagellate because they were swimming in that pond there. So I sent a note to Deanna. Deanna sent a note to Public Works. And Department of Public Works got back to me and said, well, you do know that that is tidal water coming in. I wasn't going to debate with them. I wasn't going to argue with them. That's why I sent you the note. But Bill, just so you know what went on with that, I was trying to give them a heads up. Nobody posted a sign at the pond, even though the Kennel Club had a huge dog show. And that's what I was trying to warn them about.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks,
Okay.
Joe. Sorry.
It could have been an overreaction on my part, but on the other hand, it could have actually been a real thing. So in your line of work, you try and head off any problems. So that's what I was trying to do.
All right.
Harbor Commission, Jeff, anything you want to throw out here?
Other than the Eversource proposal is still working its way through the regulatory process. And at the last meeting of the Harbor Commission, there were representatives of Eversource, and they had submitted previously their pre-application plans to the Harbor Commission. If you remember, the month before, last month, or now we're in July, May, the commission tabled that pending additional information, and the commission looked at the pre-application plans it was last week, I guess. And the finding was, one, that the commission requests additional information from Eversource concerning the extent of what they said at the meeting for the first time is an exclusion zone that would be around the cables and that would affect the work on the dock. And then the second part of the motion was that the commission reserves its right to, had no objection to it, the application going forward to DEEP. The commission reserves its right to continue to review it and provide other comments, but also recommended that DEEP attach a condition to its permit. specifying that if the city if there's any additional costs required for maintenance of the dock or replacement of the dock and pilings as a result of the presence of the transmission lines, then Eversource should pay the added cost. And that absent that condition, that the proposal would be inconsistent with the harbor management plan. So it's going ahead to DEEP, and now the Shellfish Commission will have to make its comments. I'm assuming they'll do that at the meeting after this.
I just want to throw something out from days gone by at the Maritime Aquarium. When they wanted to put pilings in, they called up Eversource and the electric company, South Norwalk Electric, to ask where the power lines were that went under the river, which we knew were in the vicinity of the dock, but nobody knew where they were. They could not pinpoint the exact location where they went in and where they came out. And what the aquarium had to do was hire somebody to come in and use a power dredge to dig up as much as they could without getting into the pipes. And even then, we couldn't find them. And what they did is they put the new pilings in where they knew the power lines weren't. So it's something we may want to pay attention to when Eversource puts their lines in. Where do they go in? And then where do they come out? And can it be marked literally in stone so that the city has an idea of what we have to deal with in the future and not hidden?
And the other matter before the commission, since its last meeting, was a presentation from the Planning and Zoning Department concerning the rewrite of the zoning regulations. And what was presented to us was the proposed waterfront rezoning regulations. So that's something that the commission Harbor Commission will continue to review, and will have to make a comment. Will not have to, but will provide comments and recommendations before those regulations can be adopted. And we've had some discussion about that, because there's also that there was also the resiliency discussion presentation. I forget if that was last week, but that's addressing the same area that would be covered by the waterfront rezoning. So they're very interesting questions that have been raised by those two efforts, the resiliency study and the rezoning study, that we'll continue to discuss.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Diana.
I know in our agenda, you have some note that there will be a discussion about the planning and zoning. Would this be a time, though, related to Water Street and the resiliency study, if I wanted to ask a couple of quick questions, or would you prefer I wait till we get to the planning and zoning?
Wait till we get to
Okay.
potential zoning changes.
Okay,
My gut feeling is it's going to be a hot topic tonight. And I'm hoping. Okay, Dick, anything you want to toss out for us? Any new adventures? You're muted.
You hear me now?
Can hear you.
You can hear me.
Yes.
Okay. 12 rivers in the middle of the state have now been declared with fishing advisories not to eat more than one fish a week of freshwater fish. And that's due to PFAS and other things. And my guess is that if they tested all the rest of the rivers in the state, they would probably all be on fishery advisories. And I'm going to talk over what I found with the Norwalk River with Jeff Yates of Trout Unlimited and see what he thinks. But other than that, I don't have a lot to add. I have done duplicate testing of the Norwalk River sites with a cheaper variety called Cyclopure. I just don't have the results back yet. I'll let you know what they are as soon as I hear from them.
I hope they work, Dick, for all of our sake.
We'll see.
Yeah. Okay, DPW, the treatment plant tour. Only 3 people signed up for that, so in essence, Mr. Kolb prefers not to take a not shutdown, but schedule a tour through the plant with so few people. So hopefully we'll try again at a later date, see if more people are available and want to go through it. Now, under old business,
Mr. Chair,
yes,
just had a quick one. Yeah, I was, thank you for having that opportunity. I'm hoping that we can sign up. I wanted to know though, could we have Ralph Kolb or someone from a designee come to one of our meetings to give us updates in general, like, because there's such an important facet of water quality, of course, in the city. Could they give an update, for instance, a status on the DEEP violation notice or whatever it was, and then anything relating to their upcoming budget? They're going to start making the budget for next year in about 2 months. So it would be wonderful, as I know that you have once tried to have Ralph Kolb or one of his designees come.
3 times.
Okay, well, I don't think we should give up. And I do think it would be great if he could just be a guest speaker briefly at this committee, at least on the status of the DEEP violation notice.
Joe,
That'll
you
be-
should know that Roger Reynolds from Save the Sound was very eager to meet with Ralph, and I think they've had that meeting. I don't know what the outcome of it was. I'll try to find out. He wanted an update on all the improvements that have to be made under the consent order.
That would be perfect. Thanks.
They did meet, Dick. So we can probably find out what happened.
Yeah,
Excellent. Diane, one of the things he did say is any one of you are more than welcome to go to their meetings and ask the questions there directly. But every time I've requested somebody to come here and discuss matters with us, I got the same answer. You can come to our meetings. So that's where it stood for several months now. Okay. Under old business, Dick, any new PFAS work?
nothing more than what we're already into. And as I said, I'm waiting for the results to come back on the $75 test to see if there's anything to it.
Okay, I don't know if anybody saw it or heard it. I heard it on Channel 12. I wasn't watching it. But apparently, when building the new fields was turned down in Wilton, it wasn't by many votes. So they're gonna try.
45 votes.
Yeah, so they're gonna try again to get the fields put in up there. So,
That's too bad.
yeah, we may just want it on the radar. And kudos to you guys for fighting that fight and getting the data from up there, because it only has an impact on us down here.
Also, Joe, on that, the Common Council is probably going to have the 3 Broad River fields on their agenda very soon. So we should all be paying attention to that.
Okay, then hopefully we have to reach out to the Common Council and let them know what we know about that.
Yeah, we have, but it might be good timing to do it again because the vote is going to be soon.
Okay, thank you. I'll see if I can get a note out either this weekend or early next week.
That would be good.
Let's see. And Diane, any forward motion on the directory of who to call?
So I've put together a list of typically who we might want to call, and I wanted to sit down with Bill Mooney and also with you, Joe, or we could talk on the phone. I have a list of various entities that, dependent upon what the issue is, such as an example, you saw red, someone saw red in the water. So I've put together a list. I just have to double check that these numbers are the most recent, of course, for the health department. The fire department, we have a local community emergency coordinator. The DPW sewage treatment plant, I still have to pinpoint who they want us to refer a concerned citizen to. We want to give exact phone numbers so someone doesn't feel they're getting the runaround. And of course, we don't want that. Planning and zoning, who is in touch with, of course, Harbor Commission. It's just going to be a list of phone numbers and also websites or email addresses as to who to get in touch with for a concern, including the Citizen Service Bureau that our city has, if all else fails. Want to coordinate with them as to the fact that they ask enough questions so that it's faster in order for the proper department to respond. So DEEP, of course, has emergency spill response phone numbers. I have those listed. There's a few of them. Then there's also the National Response Center. And so that we would just have a list and but with some guidance and what in general people should gather, such as it's just a guide, the location of the observation of odor or observation of sheen or dead fish, the date that they noticed it, the name and address of themselves, and some do provide for anonymous concerns, anonymous complaints that I think should be considered by us and others. The name and address of the site that they saw material would be helpful if they know it. Sometimes they don't. So it would just be a guidance document on how to get action quickly and going to the right division so that the right thing could be done, things could be done quickly and they could determine whether it's an issue or not. So Bill, I'll reach out to you separately and see if we could just sit down. I want to make sure I have the right contact information for the health department. I'm sure the epidemiologist, Brian Weeks, at your direction could help you because he has information about some of that type of thing. And I've been reaching out to the fire marshal, but they were busy setting up for the fireworks display. So I will attempt to reach out to them again this week. And so at least a week before our next meeting, I'll send out a draft, and I welcome any of your input on what you'd like to see on this guidance form and directory.
We would appreciate that.
Yeah.
And one thing, if you could also add, and maybe perhaps you've already done that, but like it's important to put a date and time as well.
Oh yeah.
Especially the time, just so we know exactly when it is. But you probably already had that, but I just want to make sure.
Yep, I did. But thank you.
Hey, Joe, there's one thing I forgot to tell you on PFAS. The state was trying to put through $75 million to help local communities on the waterfront deal with PFAS in their drinking water systems. That was SB 100. It got shot down, which I think was a big mistake. But 3M has now rolled out $10.1 billion to set up an independent fund for just that reason, followed by DuPont with $1.3 billion. So I guess there's going to be some money flying around to get some of these things straightened out, but it's going to be a drop in the bucket.
Yeah, but what it also means is somebody in that big building over on East Avenue has to reach out and request it.
That's right.
Because if it's not requested, we don't get it.
My guess is it'll disappear pretty fast.
Yep. So it's 3M and DuPont that both have monies available.
Just did it.
Do you by any chance have an address?
I can see what I can find out.
Okay, because we can send that to City Hall, and Bill, you might be able to help us on that, direct it through proper channels to see if we can put our hand out and get it. And John Pinto might be able to help with the Harbor Commission. And one way or another, we might be able to get it. And Steve, I don't want you salivating over this, but it would be a good thing for you.
I don't want to make an issue out of it, but as you know, our water companies were having trouble struggling with 80 parts per trillion. And the state then came through and said 10 for PFOS and 10 or 16 for PFOA. And the EPA then came through and said, our new limit will be 4. And so that's going to have a lot of people scrambling. And you don't have to have that in place until 9 months after September the 1st, 2024. So everybody's kicking the can down the road. Very dangerous.
Excuse me, Dick, can I ask you a question on that, what you're just talking? When they talk about measuring PFAS, there are several hundred derivatives. What do they use as the barometer, the standard of concentration? Because there's
PFOA and PFOS. Those are the two big ones and the most likely to contribute to cancer.
right. So those are the ones that they actually measure. They actually determine those that are there.
Those are the ones that had 80 part per trillion on them at one point. It's now
Right.
down to 4 parts per trillion.
And so those are that's the most prevalent form. That is, there's one chemical form that is being measured. You do, but what do they measure? GC mass spec is the
Now,
methodology.
the EPA says they're going to add 4 more to that with onerous numbers as well. We'll have to wait till they see. They're way behind the 8 ball on this thing.
What is the so-called you have the low cost test that you said $5, the $75 test. What does that involve?
It involves taking a sample and running it through a filter and then sending the filter off to a place called Cyclopure. And they
What-
do the analysis of the filter. Just how they do that, I don't know.
Okay, that's what I was curious about, because they don't use like a mass spec or GC mass spec to quantify or qualify the type of PFAS that's there.
That I don't know. I know that York Laboratories does do just that. They charge $295 a sample.
No, because the reason why I asked too is that my nephew works for Aquarian and they measure PFAS almost daily in the various reservoirs that they control. So and they send it up to the state. There's a state laboratory that does that. I don't know. I have to find out a little bit more about that. He's the actual one that goes out and does the testing for Aquarian.
All information you find in that area is greatly received because it's been kept under the wraps.
Well, that's what
And
I'm,
the state-
I don't
The
want.
state's very, very reluctant to give us any surface water standards or methodology or quality assurance plans. And it's always in the works. That's what we hear. It's in the works.
John, what he's done, what Dick has done, and excuse me for cutting in, Dick, but he's done a double blind. He's using the cheap one as well as York Labs, and he wants to do a comparison. Are they coming up with the same data?
That's right. Yeah. Okay. It might be a different number, but if you got well, it might be a different number, an absolute number. But if you see, what I'm saying,
If they're close.
yeah, right. You want to, yes, right. You see comparative analysis of the two methodologies. That's correct. You might not come up with the exact same number, but if the trend is there, if one goes up, the other goes up, the other goes down, the other goes down. Yeah. Okay. All right. But I'm going to find out a little bit more about what methodologies they use. That is for Aquarian and how they send it out.
The only outfit so far that's come back and said they can test through surface waters is Cornell, and Cornell will not have the equipment in place until September.
Anything else on PFOS? PFOS. Okay, Jeff, the stage is yours.
Well, that sort of sounds ominous, but I thought that we might discuss a little bit the ongoing zoning proposals as they affect the waterfront. And this is of interest, I know, to Diane, because I recently saw your testimony, I think, during the Coastal Management Act. I looked at the state library transcripts, but that's a different story. So we thought it might be helpful to discuss the waterfront zoning proposals in the context of the Coastal Management Act, the state act, and also the Norwalk's Municipal Coastal Program. for the benefit of the people who are making the decisions to adopt this or modify it or how they wish to proceed. And it's an interest, you know, that the Federal Coastal Management Act was, and this sounds like a lecture. I hope it's not. In my interest, this is all the work I've been doing for the last 40 plus years. But you know, all this started with the Federal Act in 1972, I believe it was. And of course, the reason for that is that of all the population that lives in the coastal areas and the sensitivity of coastal resources and the pressures for development. So the dual goals of the national program was to guide beneficial and appropriate use and protect coastal resources. And that authorized state programs to be established. So it's sort of a top down. It begins with the federal government and the state governments and then the municipalities. And the incentives for the states to develop their own programs is the availability of federal funds for a variety of coastal management purposes. So Connecticut, the Connecticut Coastal Management Act was approved by the legislature in 1978. And then it became effective in 79. And it's very interesting to go back and look at the transcripts of the number of public hearings that were held in 1978 along the coast to get input from people before the legislature acted on it. And there was a hearing in Stamford that was held. And at that time, Mayor Collins was the mayor, and a statement was read on his behalf supporting the legislation, but also recognizing that implementation of the act would be in large part a responsibility of municipal governments acting through planning and zoning authorities. And there was other testimonies. The old transcripts are quite interesting. They've been scanned by the state library. There's a lot of, they were typed and there's mistakes, but you can see what, and there are familiar names that we know or remember that testified at the time. So then the act took effect, and also at that time already, Norwalk had established what they called the CAM Advisory Committee or Advisory Board, Coastal Area Management Advisory Board, which also consisted of many people whose names are still quite familiar to us now. So the act was passed, and then that authorized municipalities, the coastal municipalities, to establish municipal coastal programs. And those programs were based on they were called plans of development, not plans of conservation and development. So the municipal coastal programs were based on amendments to or changes to the local plans of development and zoning regulations as those plans and regulations affect the coastal area. And so that's provided for in the statutes. Also, implementation, of course, would be through the state's own regulatory process, as well as the municipal land use process. And through the land use process, the act authorizes coastal site plan reviews, whereby the local planning and zoning authorities would review applications within the designated coastal area for consistency with the coastal management policies. So that took effect. And then right away, Norwalk's municipal, what did I call it, CAM Advisory Committee was working on the amendments to the master plan or the plan of development. And those were adopted at that time. What I'm talking about now, it was a Planning and Zoning Commission. And so the Planning and Zoning Commission adopted the amendments to the Plan of Conservation and Development in 1982. And that was signed by Mayor O'Connor, as I remember. He was in there, and then Mayor Collins came back after him. So that was the first part of the municipal coastal program in Norwalk. The second part was making amendments to the zoning regulations to implement the Coastal Management Act. And that took a number of years, and they were focused on developing and applying the Marine Commercial District on Water Street. And that took a number of years to do, and it was finally over objections from property owners there, who argued that the Marine Commercial District would be too restrictive concerning the future development of their properties. Now, the focus then with that Marine Commercial District had to do with the protection of water-dependent uses along the shoreline there. The discussion of the flood hazard and the vulnerability and the risk of flooding was not a prominent issue then in the discussion of the development of that zone. And so that took again, till 1988. And then that was signed. And I believe at that time, Mayor Esposito was the mayor. So it went through three different mayors. And then Bill, could I share my screen? Would that be okay just for a second? And
Absolutely, Jeff. Sure, go ahead.
see if I can do this and see if okay, this will work, I think. No, I don't know if you can you see my screen yet?
Not yet, but it's working on it. There, we got it now.
All right, this is when Norwalk, when the Planning and Zoning Commission adopted the marine commercial zone along Water Street that was in 1988. There was I guess you'd call it well, they called it a presentation. And this is my invitation actually from 1988 from the DEP to attend this presentation signifying the completion of Norwalk's municipal coastal program. And so I'll just read this and then you can tell me to be quiet. That the development of Norwalk's municipal coastal program began in 1981, being initiated and completed by the city's Planning and Zoning Commission and staff under the authority of the Connecticut Coastal Management Act. This program, the primary goal of which is the effective management, use, development, and preservation of Norwalk's coastal land and water resources, consists of amendments to the city's plan of development adopted in '82 and subsequent zoning and regulation changes necessary to implement the plan. The final changes were recently adopted, culminating over 7 years of dedicated work. From its inception, this program, in conjunction with the state's Coastal Management Act, has resulted in significant gains in protection and enhancement of water-dependent facilities, public access opportunities, and preservation of significant coastal resources. Now that the program is completed, it will serve an even greater role in guiding future coastal uses and development. So that took place in 1988. But then something else happened, and I'm going to see if I can get to this again. One moment. I'll share my screen once more. But something else happened in 1988. The Planning and Zoning Commission was split into two, a zoning commission and a planning commission. And the Water Street property owners brought a lawsuit against the former Planning and Zoning Commission for the imposition of that marine commercial zone. And now let me just share some of again, the purpose of this background is just, I had a friend that worked for the Corps of Engineers for over 40 years. And when he retired, he said something that stuck with me. He said that he noticed in their work that issues they thought they had addressed came back after about 30 years because the people involved were no longer there. There was no historic record that was kept, and the other possibility is that nobody cared. So the purpose of talking about this is just to provide background, because I think when you're working on these sorts of projects, it's appropriate and respectful to think and recognize what the people did who worked before you and what your work is building on. So that's my only intention in going over this. But let me see, Bill, if I can share the screen once more, which I can.
Jeff, let me cut in for a second. How many of you were able to see either the last meeting personally or look at it online later? No one.
Which
So-
meeting was this?
The last meeting that the zoning group had. Diane, you did, and Jeff.
I saw the meeting, the only meeting I was present with or in was the meeting where Planning and Zoning presented the waterfront zoning to the Harbor Commission and the Shellfish Commission.
On
That
June
was a
20th.
Special meeting, yes.
Okay, go ahead, Jeff. I'm sorry.
But, and here, I'm just going back, some of these old newspaper articles are interesting. So this is 1987. And you notice back then, we didn't have electronic, files and download stuff, and the stuff wasn't available online. But just beginning with this, again, the Marine Commercial District in 87 had not yet been adopted, but it was being planned. And the issue was again, protection of water dependent uses. So the new zoning was being considered. And again, the principal purpose that was expressed was to preserve the waterfront for water dependent uses. The floodplain issues were not prominent then. It was preserving it for water dependent uses. The Water Street property owners, I shouldn't say, I don't know if all of them did, but Water Street property owners objected. They argued that it was a unfair taking of their development rights, and that they wanted additional residential density than what was being proposed in the new Water Street zone. I'll just go through these quickly. They're very interesting. And here's the Water Street zone. You know, sort of a crude map compared to the computer generated maps we have today. I also might mention that the original amendments to the plan of development in 82, they look sort of crude too, because they were typed, you know, on a typewriter. And then when you made a mistake, you cut out the paragraph and you pasted it back. But that doesn't mean it wasn't a really good report based on just its appearance. It didn't have computer generated graphics or maps. But that, again, that doesn't, in many cases, those old reports that were done, and that report was done by planning and zoning without a consultant. It was done by the planning and zoning staff back in 82. But it demonstrated a lot of thought and also a lot of effort by all the people who worked on it in Norwalk, from both representatives of marinas. Jim Gardella was part of it. There were others from the conservation end and land trust who were all involved. But anyway, so here's, if you go through this is again, Planning and Zoning Commission defending the zoning against the objections from Water Street. And then prior to adoption, the Committee of Planning and Zoning supported it, and the zone was adopted. And we went back through all of the old minutes of the commission meetings back then. And I didn't assemble these for tonight, but they also tell an interesting story, because they also record the comments that residents made when the zone was being proposed for adoption. And also the state of Connecticut, as you might imagine, supported the zone as consistent with the Coastal Management Act. And Mr. Rock found this old article that he wrote, and some of you who knew him, he later became the DEP commissioner for both John Rowland and I forget the governor who came after John Rowland. But Art was the DEP commissioner, and he was quite an interesting character. Not that it matters, but I recently had a discussion with him at his vacation home, his retirement home. Governor Rell, of course, he served from, but he's now retired in Maine. And he actually, well, anyway, I'll go on. But then sometime in 88, I guess it was, the Planning and Zoning Commission was split into separate planning and zoning commissions. And the Water Street property owners either sued or were threatened to sue the former Planning and Zoning Commission that had proposed that had adopted the Marine Commercial District. And then when the new zoning commission then proposed to modify the adopted Marine Commercial District. And the Planning Commission objected to that, because they said that the zoning commission was diminishing the water dependent protections. But the zoning commission adopted the new regulations anyway. And here's this interesting article that's titled "The Money Factor: Who Will Profit from this Development?" And if you read all this stuff, you see almost the same exact arguments that are being made today, that the property is so valuable, it needs to be developed with more income generating uses in order to provide the continued public access and the water dependent facilities. So it's almost like history is repeating itself. And I'm not saying that's, I'm not criticizing that. I'm just saying it's interesting to know the the context and what this is all based on. Then what happened after that, after the zoning commission changed the marine commercial use, the DEP sued the zoning commission for violation of the Coastal Management Act and for changing the marine commercial zone upon which the municipal coastal program was developed or approved. And so I think that's an interesting, it didn't go to court though. And when I talked to the former commissioner of DEEP, Mr. Rock in Maine, he said he didn't remember the actual details of the settlement, but that he knows he would not have agreed to a settlement that in any way diminished the standing of the Coastal Management Act in Norwalk. And since this didn't go to the to court, and there are no files on this in the Attorney General's office, and the DEEP has been looking for the resolution, the terms of the resolution of that suit now. But now, I'll stop with that, and I'll just get to the final point here. So back at that time, again, the big issue was the impact of potential redevelopment on water dependent uses. Now there's an additional concern, and that's the concern of development in the coastal floodplain. With all the discussion we have now about rising sea level and resiliency and sustainability and the focus that the state has, you've got clearly competing interests or issues here, and they intersect on Water Street. And the Circa group is doing its resiliency study in the same area that the city is considering changing the zoning regulations to eliminate half of the marine commercial district and replace that half with an urban district that will allow more density, more residential density in that area. And so there are competing interests, and how do they get resolved? And my feeling is that the people who are responsible for making the decisions to resolve it should have all this background and understand the implications of it. Especially recently, and DEEP has provided this to us. DEEP has made statements and I was involved in two of them in Stratford and Stamford, that proposals that would increase residential density in the coastal floodplain are inconsistent with the Coastal Management Act. They also made a similar statement in New Haven. But those statements are not regulatory. They're in effect advisory. And DEEP's only recourse, and so a municipal planning and zoning commission can override those or can approve something over those objections. So that's the interesting, I think, discussion. It's certainly a legitimate discussion. You have the concerns about resiliency and rising sea level and the Coastal Management Act, and then you also have the local desire for additional development. And I did have a chance to talk with the director of Circa, the Connecticut Institute of Resiliency and Climate Adaptation. And it was at a meeting in another town, and this topic came up, not with respect to Norwalk, but just in general. The conflict between goals for resiliency planning and goals for increased development. And the director's opinion was from Circa that they did not look at their work for the purpose of enabling, supporting additional development in the 100-year floodplain. That the purpose of resiliency planning is to accelerate recovery and to reduce vulnerability of existing development. But that from his perspective, it's not to be used to support new development. And he used the analogy in this other meeting in another town that if you're in a hole, you need to stop digging. And that was the analogy he made to development in the coastal floodplain. So anyway, I just thank you for letting me go on about this, but I don't present it to be negative or critical, but just to try to preserve the historical record. And because I think that the work that people do in this field shouldn't be forgotten. It should be recognized and taken into consideration when you make decisions now. So that's the end of my long spiel. Thank you.
Any questions for Jeff? Diane, you still have your hand up.
Yeah, I just put it up. Thank you. Thanks, Jeff. It's like a trip to through the past, and I appreciate all that. The articles, love to see them at some point, to read more of them. I just wanted this group to understand that even though there was a second planning and zoning public meeting, we still, as a group or individual groups or individual people, can still send ideas to the staff or suggestions in changing the regulations. They're going to be discussing the regulations all summer. At least that's what I've been told. And there is supposed to be another final public meeting in September or October. But I would suggest very strongly, because of what Jeff just said, that any interests that may not be in agreement or have better suggestions, especially on Water Street and along the waterfront, get your information to them sooner rather than later. Tonight at 7 o'clock, so I am going to get off of this so I can make some comments of my own about contamination. The waterfront industrial zone study is up for a vote by the Common Council Economic and Community Development Committee tonight. Now, that means that any of you want to look in on that, take a look at it online. We have till Tuesday's general Common Council meeting to make any further suggestions. They have had a series of public meetings, but this has a lot to do with exactly the spot that Jeff's talking about and the entire waterfront up to Wall Street. And they plan to change a lot of the zones from industrial to boutique. And I mean, there's a lot of interesting ideas, but there are also some gaps in the information in the report. So that's what I feel compelled to speak to on my own as a individual who's in the business. So that's right. Never a dull moment. Thank you, Jeff.
Anything else? Steve?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff, for a wonderful report. And Diane, maybe a question to you. Based on that proposed changes now north of the Walk Bridge up to Water Street, I mean, should that go all residential? Doesn't that obviate the need for this bridge that we're building?
I guess I don't understand. I don't
So
think
if
it's
there-
all.
So if there are no future commercial needs, let's say to bring barges and so forth upriver, do you feel that we need this bridge to lift the way it does? I don't see how it supports apartments.
Well, the area north of I-95 bridge, there aren't plans to make it all residential. They have these interesting names for adaptive zones that allow the current industrial uses that are legacy companies that we know of, Divine, King, O&G, until they leave those sites, it's going to remain industrial. But of course, market movements and pressures, this won't happen for decades. So that's why I understand what you're asking me, but I don't get a sense that one could say that, why do you need, if the barge need is ended, there could be arguments about definitely why do you need a bridge that goes up and down, but any changes to the industrial uses now in the barges isn't going to happen for years.
Wouldn't there be a
Besides
market?
that, Diane, the whole program's in gear. Replace that bridge.
Well, I think it's clear that it's too big to fail.
So yeah, I'm not going to make, I mean, I have heard and have spoken about that bridge, but I'll get off anyway.
Peter?
Thanks, Diane.
Pete?
You know, if they make that all residential, won't have to worry about it anyways. It'll all fill in and no more dredging. So you've killed that area anyways, as far as I'm concerned. They have no concept of anything. These zoning people that are here now, they're all transients. None of them were born and raised here. That's the biggest problem we have. I mean, East Norwalk, we don't want, everybody you talk to in East Norwalk does not want where the bank is made into apartments. Not one person wants it, but they're still letting it go and making it a one-way street. Making it a one-lane street. Cemetery Street is going to become a one-lane street. And that has runoff coming under, there's pipes underneath that have, when it rains heavy, the pipes underneath run to the mill pond. They probably don't even know they're there. I'm just fed up with zoning. They don't care about us. I mean, look at now. From what I hear, Norton Place got sold because their tax incentive ran out. So what do you think is going to happen to that place now? They don't care about the harbor. They don't care about, zoning does not care about anything, but how can we build more, make more money, and who the hell knows what else? It's straining our sewer system. It's jeopardizing our harbor because of the sewer system. I mean, you had 220 apartments. People flushing the toilet, that's a lot more. Now you're doing 100 and something here and 100 there and 200 here. I've just had it with it. You can't talk to them. No, you can send anything you want. They're gonna do whatever they want anyways. They don't care. That's why I believe if you're on a committee like that, you should be living here at least a good 10 to 15 years before you get on some board like that. And know what you're getting into. They want to make it another Manhattan or something? Who the hell knows? I'll end up talking. I'm just getting more aggravated.
Thanks, Pete. Anything else? Okay, is there anybody out there from the public that has a comment or whatever? We still have a few minutes left.
There is one person, raise your hand. Let me, let's. Speak.
Hi, it's Linnell. I
Hi,
want to
Lynn.
say congratulations, Diane, for your award. And Pete, I agree with you completely. And I continue to write letters and ask questions. But thank you, guys. And thank you, Jeff, for a great history.
Thank you, Linnell. Anybody else? Okay, very quickly on the minutes from the last meeting. Anybody have any changes, additions from the minutes from the last meeting? If not, can somebody make a motion to approve the minutes? Steve? Is there a second? Okay, we got 2 seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Excellent. The minutes clearly pass. Now can I have a motion to adjourn? Okay,
A second, Pete Johnson.
okay, so we're out of here until next month. And keep tuned to what's going on with the planning and zoning. I did send them a personal letter. And I have not heard back, even though I was told I would hear back on 5 questions that I raised. And because I did not have your vote on it, because I didn't have time to get it out, I just sent it out personally. But I will send you a copy of it so you have an idea of what I had requested. So see you next month. And Bill, I did not get a link for the next meeting, for Steve's meeting.
Okay, I will, I'll forward you mine and I'll just change your name when, we'll just go that route, okay?
Excuse me, Bill, can I ask a question regarding the water quality interns? Have they been,
Yes.
have they been engaged yet? And they are, again, being quasi-funded by the Harbor Commission as well as the Shellfish Commission?
Yes, that's what we had talked about, is getting the money over to to the Harbor Commission for them, but they're working, they're being paid
Okay.
by the city right now, but we need to reallocate the money a little bit. So yes, that's what needs to be addressed.
And their agenda is based on water quality testing and just what bacteria count, salinity, doing water quality for what North River as well as positions up the river or the sound.
Both, they're doing the beaches and when they're not doing the beaches with us or with Harbor Watch doing the rivers.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, see you guys at 7:15.
You will.
Okay, bye all. See you.